going to be the John Pickle Laps segment episode, but rightfully so as a Celtics fan. And I mean, officially, once again, recording this basically a week later, so the confetti literally has fallen and the parade has happened. And I'm not sure. Did you hear the story about Jaylen Brown losing, I guess, a ring of his, not championship ring?
Yeah.
So hopefully he gets that back. I'm not sure if he has. We'll see. But nonetheless, getting to the actual finals itself, as obviously, unless you're living on a rock or don't watch the NBA, then what are you doing here? But Celtics win pretty convincing fashion in terms of games, 4-1 over the Mavericks. I remember Game 5 was convincing. I'm trying to remember the scores of the other ones, but I'm pretty sure most of the other games, a couple of the other games too, were pretty. I know obviously Game 4 is a blowout, but y'all lost that one. But nonetheless, I'm gonna throw it to you. You're the Celtics fan, obviously. About, I guess, your thoughts on the finals itself, because there's still some narratives we can go over afterwards, of course, that still need to be addressed.
Well, a lot of people, specifically in the media, I think the Celtics were the favorites, as they should have been going into the series. And they showed why they were the favorites with the 4-1 victory. But I did find it interesting that a lot of the media found it really, I guess, funny, or I don't know. I don't know if they really believed that the Mavericks were going to win the series or what the thought process was. But even the Celtics afterwards on social media were just clowning tons of people from all of the ESPN and Fox Sports and all these different places because, of course, they all decided to, either pick the Mavericks or say the Celtics are serial chokers or say that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown aren't good enough and they should be split up over the years or what have you, right? There's been a ridiculous amount of narratives about this team for years, even despite the fact that they were the best team in the NBA this year in terms of their regular season record. Everybody said they played literally nobody in the East, despite the fact that on the regular season they had a dominant record against the Western Conference, and then they go against the Western Conference champions in Dallas and they beat them. I stand by the statement. The only team that I think had a legitimate chance to beat Boston in the finals from the West this year was going to be the Denver Nuggets, and they didn't even make it out of the second round. So it's somewhat hard to say that they were even going to be better than Boston this year if they couldn't go and beat, Minnesota. So, I mean, maybe it's a matchup thing because of Minnesota's size. I don't know. But ultimately, that going in, that was the only team that I felt Boston was going to lose to. We didn't have to play them, and so we were able to win. And so, yeah, I don't know if you felt this way or if a lot of other people felt this way, but as a fan, it felt like it was obviously great to see my team win a championship, but at the same time, I sort of expected it the entire year. In previous seasons, I have had way more emotional investment in terms of like the roller coaster, the ups and downs, the game sevens, all that kind of stuff. This year, the playoff run, they lost 3 games. I never got nervous with the Celtics essentially in the playoffs this year, outside of kind of like every game one, because game one of the series, you're at home, you just don't know what happens. You get a little nervous going in, like, well, what if we lose? And Boston just always took care of business. So yeah, it's great to win. All the people that can want to say what all they want about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and they can't win together and they have to be split up and blah blah blah. They just won a championship. So, and here's the best part about it as a Celtics fan, is these guys are signed through the next handful of years. I think Jason Tatum's the only one that's like going to have an extension within the next 2 years. And they have enough money based on the fact that the salary cap is going to go up with the new TV deal to sign to a supermax and still keep the entire core. They already signed Porzingis when they traded for him. They signed Drew Holiday to an extension when they traded for him. Jaylen Brown signed that huge deal. I think what was it, last year? And so all those guys are already locked up. I think Derek White still has 2, 3 years maybe left on his deal. I don't know the exact number, but he is signed next year too. So yeah, they're going to be able to keep this core together. Al Horford has already announced he's coming back for next year. I think at this point he realizes he still feels good enough to play. He doesn't have to be the consistent starter when Porzingis is healthy. And why not keep running it back and try and see how far you can take this thing with this team, considering that they'll be sticking together. So yeah, the future feels bright. I'm really excited for next season, and I'm just really happy that all the narratives, all the stuff that has been said about this team over the years that they've been together has finally been put to rest, and now people can sit there and argue all they want and say that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are not top 5, top 10, whatever they want to say, but I don't care because they're NBA champions.
Yeah, that's all that matters. It's funny you brought up the whole Denver being on the team that scares you, because if I remember correctly, I think Boston, the Celtics, in the regular season had a winning record against every team in the NBA except for the Nuggets.
Which is why I felt that way.
Y'all were 0-2 against the Nuggets.
Yeah. And they were the reigning champs, so it's like impossible not to feel that way,
Well, and then you think matchup-wise, too, a bit of tougher matchup because, Aaron Gordon, something that we saw Dallas lacked was an elite defender, just to strictly really put on Tatum, and Aaron Gordon could have been that guy for the Nuggets, and then, who's really going to guard Jokic?
Yeah, it's where,
you saw Porzingis get in trouble defensively.
Right, like Luka, although, you can't stop him, we can throw a variety of, options at him with Jaylen Brown, with Drew Holiday, with Derek White, with Tatum. There's just so many different guys that you can throw his way that you can slow him down. There were games where he did have a lot of points, but he also had a lot of shots. I think, game 1, he had, 30-something points, but it was on, 28 shots or something like that. So we've had those opportunities. It's where with Jokic, I don't think that we had a player that could guard Jokic like that. Obviously you have Al Horford, you have Porzingis, you can throw both of them at him, but with Jokic is just so dynamic, and obviously the size is a big problem that you can't just throw Tatum or Brown or whoever else on him to try and see if that works,
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's funny, narrative wise, great that they can finally put those to rest, even though that they're kind of ludicrous, most of them. And I will say it was nice. Nice. That's what it means to say. It was good to see some of our concerns validated with Luka Doncic, things that we both mentioned even before the finals. I think going to last year, it's tough to win this style of basketball. And he got exposed defensively, literally. Everyone started. I don't know why it took the finals for people to realize. Mostly casuals, but he was, sure as everyone knows, you probably saw the Brian Windhorst, all those different compilations of him roasting Luka, and complaining to the refs, things like that, and we saw things that, and I will throw in again the conditioning, that may I think being in better shape may help you a little bit on defense, on top of obviously mentality and such with Luka, but I think that was another good takeaway from the finals, because obviously for Luka, if he's gonna be this transcendent guy, which I know he's already been statistically, and but now he's at the point where he's got to win. Maybe this poor, I don't even call it poor, because obviously he put up good numbers, but even then he was inefficient. Let's be honest, he shot really poorly from 3, and it seemed like to a point the Boston, y'all were willing to live with the step back jumpers and such, because he just obviously you're working him on both ends and making life hard on him. And also for the Tatum haters too, Luka averaged more turnovers than Tatum too, and I know Luka might be initiating more of the offense just a touch more, but Tatum once again is the main. If you go back and watch the finals, Tatum is the main initiator for the Celtics. Yes, obviously sometimes they run through Jaylen Brown or Drew, but Tatum is the main guy they rely to get the offense going and cause the defense to go into rotations, beat his matchup, etc. So some interesting things for Luka to see if he'll improve on. Obviously for Dallas too, if they can improve too, because it's always tough to repeat the next year. Now that everyone's going to be looking, to see what the Celtics kind of did to slow down Luka and expose him.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on. You talked about obviously Luka, great offensive player. He was a literal traffic cone on defense in the finals. A lot of people were bringing up the injury and saying that was a big problem, and it might be. I don't know. But I also think that people who are saying that and attempting to tell me that Luka Doncic is a good defender, which I have had arguments with people recently who have tried to make that argument to me, I just don't believe it. I feel like the only thing that I need to see to know if you're a good defender or not is when we get to the playoffs and you're playing the best teams. We're not playing these regular season bums and these bad coaches and all that kind of stuff. You're playing the best teams. How does the opposing team try to attack your defense? And it's consistent. With the Mavericks, they will attack Kyrie Irving and they will attack Luka Doncic. That is every team's attempt to try and break the Mavericks defense. They don't try to attack anybody else. It's very rare that, they're even attempting to try and get these like big switched onto them on the perimeter. Like obviously that happens, you'll take it as a matchup if you're, a small guard or a wing or something like that. But the preferred matchup, no matter who it is, whether it was Boston or, the Timberwolves or the Nuggets or whoever, was always going to be to try to get Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving onto them. And to me, that indicates you're just a bad defender, because if you're a good defender, teams don't go and hunt for you. You know what I mean? And on your point too about, the conditioning, the defense, all that kind of stuff, I've heard many people who are, and I don't say this to try and trash Luka. I say this as a legitimate point of, you talked about it. It's hard to win with this style of basketball. We saw this with James Harden's entire career. We've seen it before. You know what I mean? Sure, James Harden he got game 7 against that Warriors team, but they didn't win. And maybe they would have won that series if James Harden was a little bit of a better defender, or if his team was somehow able to be more involved in the actual creation of the offense, or the team wasn't solely built to be on James Harden's shoulders in that, in every series, because certain series, you would know as a Spurs fan, certain series James Harden just didn't show up. You were able to take him out of the game. So I say that because, like you said, Boston was willing to live with Luka living and dying by these step back threes and a heavy volume of shots. They were willing to live that way and just try to prevent ball movement. And the reason is because when you put all of that on Luka's shoulders, it's almost impossible for one man to beat you. And also, it's going to wear him down, like you said, with the conditioning. It's going to make him a less effective defender on the other side, because he's already not great, but he's also tired, and he knows that he's going to have to get the ball and take over on offense every time. And this is a stat that's been brought up many times. I'm pretty sure the only team to ever win a championship with a player that had this super high usage rate was one of the Jordan Bulls, and that usage rate ranked like 43rd all time, if I recall correctly. That's like the highest usage rate a player has ever had on a championship winning team, is 43rd all time. Luka Doncic this year had a 35.9% usage rate. That is the highest rate in the NBA this year by 3.1%. Giannis was second at 32.8, and Giannis does not typically have that number. Obviously, they had, Drew Holiday's not there. They've had some injuries throughout the team. They had a lot of coaching changes, and so Giannis's rate, he just had to start doing a lot more this year, and we saw how that fared for Milwaukee. It didn't work out great. And some of the other guys, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, like these are guys who they went crazy for their team, but they weren't really able to, go all the way. They weren't able to have that longevity throughout the entire season. They weren't able to end up getting all the way and, get to the finals and win the championship. And once again, the point being, when you have that high of a usage rate, it's going to affect you on defense. And so I don't think that even if Luka wanted to become a great defender, if he's doing that much on offense, he's going to have the energy to do so. I say that because some people have made the argument to me that when he does that much on offense, he can't give any effort on defense. Like, he has to try and just not do anything on defense in order to be the best for his team. But I just don't believe that when we've seen guys like Klay Thompson, or I guess Klay's a bad one because he wasn't a non-ball player, but like Kawhi Leonard or Jason Tatum is the 12th highest usage rate player this season. Like, we've seen a lot of players be able to be great on both sides of the ball, and Luka doesn't even have to be a great defensive player. He just has to be serviceable. And so,
I don't know. Sorry,
yeah,
but
go ahead.
To continue on your point, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm sure those LeBron, Kyrie Cavs had a high usage rate. But LeBron and even Kyrie in those when he was on the Cavs in the playoffs, at least, they would turn up the def. They would still be able to be solid on defense. So I think like you said, it kind of emboldens to that point where you just can't be a liability is the big issue. You can't have in Dallas. I think we talked about a little bit of those. Had other liabilities on top of that, and then on top of these things these kind of warts that showed up in the finals that the Celtics exposed, which once again I think is going to be very interesting team construction wise going forward, because I think I feel like the big three era, like getting 3 stars, is maybe starting to fade a bit, because we're starting to see, like Boston, for example, you got really the main 2, and then I guess you could, like, I don't really consider Porzingis a third. I know he's getting paid probably like a third, but even then, like you mentioned, you got all these other really great role players. I hate to call them even role players.
I think Boston, quite frankly, has 5-star players on their team. Like, I think Derek White, Drew Holiday, and Porzingis are star level players in this Boston system.
Yes, yeah, and so exactly. So I mean, uh, but anyways, so a little fortunate that Dallas, like, it was a great run, and I think a little bit, sometimes happens in the playoffs. You just matchups can go your way or not your way, and I think that went a little bit like we talked about for Dallas. I'm not trying to discount Dallas's route at all. I'm just saying that the matchups felt they did, and then they played a really good Celtics team, like you mentioned, John. I think the only team that would have given the Celtics really more headaches would definitely have been Denver, and hey, maybe even Minnesota. But once again, Minnesota didn't pull through. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, I don't know if Luka. I know the Olympics are this summer as well, so that could. I'm not sure if that will factor if Luka will play for. Is it, I think, Slovenia, right? I think
Right.
is his nationality. So I'm not sure. But so it'd be interesting to see if he does play. Would that maybe help his conditioning, since it's being playing 24/7, or maybe he'll take personal time away to recalibrate, or maybe not, just go have a beer in the offseason. I don't know. It would be very interesting to see how he'll bounce back. Because like I mentioned, I think when we previewed this series, about how Jokic even had to slim down a bit, before in the bubble, to kind of not be as much of a liability on defense, and obviously different because he's a center, but nonetheless, like still a solid defender, Jokic. So yeah, we'll see how Dallas, I guess, moves forward. Like you mentioned, I mean, your Celtics are locked up. Let me look up Derek White's contract, but I know at least for the next 2-3 years you have this core intact.
Yeah, by the way, just on the comment you made about LeBron's usage rate, his usage rates in Cleveland were 32.2, 31.3, 29.9, and 31.6, to where Luka Doncic has never had a year as low as any of those numbers except for his rookie season. Out of every year since his rookie season, this year was actually his lowest usage rate ever at 35.9. He has the highest usage rate of all time in NBA history. Like he's always on the ball. And once again, he's an incredible player, but I really do think that for the Mavericks to ever truly be able to get over the hump, he's got to become better off ball, and you've got to be able to find ways to get other people to initiate offense. Like I know you have Kyrie Irving. Get him more involved. We've seen him, and it was tough because I guess in Boston, like, he just did not show up at all. But we've seen him be a really effective player, even as the Robin, with LeBron, with a high usage rate, So I don't know. I really think that's a big issue that's potentially holding Luka back in a lot of ways. That it prevents the offense. It prevents other people from being able to create. It prevents the defense from being stressed more by the fact that other people are creating. It prevents Luka from being able to focus more energy towards the defensive end because he's not having to be as involved on offense. I think it makes Luka a little bit more one-dimensional because off ball, I don't feel like he's really a threat ever. It feels like when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, he's largely just waiting to get it.
Yeah, he's just like floating around at the elbow or like in the corner, like not even ready to spot up, like just like crouched over, just waiting in case they pass.
To where you see somebody like Steph Curry, like that became such a weapon in his games that the moment the ball's not in his hands, he's honestly arguably more deadly than when he has it in his hands. So yeah, I feel like that's something that Dallas needs to figure out moving forward, because even for the Mavericks, like this was a very successful season, but you got to look at what's coming next year in the West. The Nuggets are obviously going to be hungry to try and get back to the mountaintop. You've got the Timberwolves, who just had the best season probably in franchise history, and they're only going to be trying to get better and hungrier with, a guy like Anthony Edwards kind of ascending. You've got the Grizzlies maybe getting healthy and trying to get back up there. You've got
they finally get Ja back.
You've got the Thunder, who just added Caruso and are really trying to arm up and form their own title contender. You just got a lot of potential teams. Who knows what happens with some of the older squads like the Lakers or Warriors. Maybe they figure out another run and can be a threat. Who knows what happens with the Suns and all the talent they have. They don't have a lot of defenders.
Other young teams like the Rockets that were up, and who knows with the Pelicans, how they maybe calibrate. Maybe it's for the better. The Kings too. The Kings, you can't forget about them. And just, I think, let's be honest, even the bottom tier teams, let's say, I'm not trying to be a homer, but like Spurs are probably going to be better than they
absolutely
were this previous year as a whole. So, and then I'm trying to think of the other teams at the bottom, but I'm blanking. But yeah, like you said, the West as a whole is going to be better, and like we've mentioned, just bigger target in the back of your head, more tape now too. So even those regular season games that don't mean much, a little bit of a blueprint for coaches to go off and be like, oh, Dallas, okay, let's just try to, like you said, get Luka and Kyrie into switches and make them work.
Yeah.
So like it may not be to the level of detail that Boston or the playoffs may be, but it still would be somewhat to that. Now that, like you said, they're the Western
even
champs.
some of the stuff that Boston was doing defensively that I don't know if the Mavericks have ever seen before, like Jason Tatum was guarding the 5. And that was purely because anytime the center would try and set the screen for Luka, you swap from Tatum or you swap from Brown defending you to Tatum. You went from a great defensive wing to another great defensive wing. Like that's only possible because of Tatum's versatility and his ability to actually guard the 5, and also the fact that Dallas doesn't necessarily have like an Embiid or a Jokic or somebody out there. But what other teams could do that? You know what I mean? Like we talked about the Denver Nuggets. What if all of a sudden they have Aaron Gordon just guarding the big man? I don't know where they put Jokic on somebody else. They just let Aaron Gordon guard the 5. So anytime you try to initiate those switches, you're going from whoever's guarding Luka on ball to Aaron Gordon. Like that's tough. Like what other teams can employ that? The Thunder, you go from Alex Caruso or Lou Dort guarding you over to Jalen Williams. Like there's just so many teams.
Either one of the Jalen Williams too, by the way.
Exactly.
Because they're both solid defenders.
Exactly. So there's so many things that I feel like the Mavericks are going to have to deal with next year. Now that they've had this great run, like you said, the target on their back. That I don't even know if they make it back to the finals next year with the way the West is. With the East, I feel very confident Boston can do it. Once it's been the same way, it's even probably easier now than it has been the last couple of years because. Milwaukee, they lose out on Drew Holiday. Who knows how they look next year with all the coaching stuff that they've been going through. Miami, there's rumors that they're going to trade Jimmy Butler. So those are the two teams that I've always been fearful of. Now, obviously, there's some young ascending teams like the Pacers, but like I said, it doesn't feel as tough as Dallas's road is going to be in the West. And I think that's the tough part is when you make the finals, it feels like you're such a young team. It can only get better from here, but that's just not really how it works sometimes. One last thing I did want to say, because we have been a little bit negative on Luka Doncic, obviously to circle back to what we started with, is I do find the NBA narratives a little interesting around a lot of players. And I say this because I saw this happen at the Boston Celtics. I saw this happen to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, where when players have a lot of early success, I think that fans all of a sudden start to bring in the whole ring narrative. We saw it happen to LeBron. We've seen it happen to many players, right? Where all of a sudden how good they are is not good enough without winning a championship. And we already gave our critiques of Luka Ball and how that contributes to even being able to win. So like all that exists, right? I'm not discounting all of that. But I just don't want Luka to become the next player all of a sudden because he lost this finals. And then let's say next year they get eliminated in the second round of the Western Conference Finals or whatever. They don't replicate the same year. They don't elevate like everybody thinks they will, to where all of a sudden the narrative on him starts to spin and it becomes super negative and it's Luka's a choker, Luka's not good enough, whatever, right? Because he's a great player. You know what I mean? And I bring this up just because it happens a lot to players who have early success. And I say that because Luka, hold on, let me check this. Luka, I believe, is what, 25, 26 years old? Luka is 25 years old. Okay. Jason Tatum is 26, I believe. Jason Tatum is 26 years old, okay? Both of them, a lot of early success in their career. Tatum a little bit more earlier because he came into that Boston team his rookie year, and they took LeBron's Cavs to Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. So, like, he had a little bit earlier, but... and Anthony Edwards, he's 22. He's starting to experience this now where he's getting the early success. Imagine he makes a finals over the next couple of years. He's going to be in that same boat. Think about the way that people talk about Jason Tatum or Luka Doncic and their careers and everything they've accomplished, right? And then compare that to, say, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai is also 25. He is, I believe, 3 or 4 months younger than Luka Doncic. But the way that we talk about those two players, I feel like is wildly different because Shai just elevated to this level within the last 2-3 years. Luka has been at this level the last 5-6 years. Same with Tatum, right? Like he was getting to the Eastern Conference Finals for a long time. You know what I mean? And so I feel like people, when a player gets super successful at a very young age, but they're young, so obviously they don't win a championship, all of a sudden everybody just starts destroying them. Like that happened to Tatum, their first finals when they lost to the Warriors. And then after that, back when we were still making posts on Instagram, I made a post where I showed LeBron didn't win until he was 28. Steph Curry didn't win until he was 27. Michael Jordan didn't win until he was like 28. Like all these superstars who are these all-time greats were not winning until their late 20s. There are a few, Kobe, Magic, who won really early, right? But a lot of them did not win until their late 20s. Jason Tatum just won his first ring at the age of 26. And so I say all this to say, to wrap this point up, because I know I've been rambling a little bit, is don't let the media start doing all that BS narrative stuff that they've done with Jason Tatum the last like 2-3 years, that they did with Jaylen Brown, where they tried to tear this team apart. Don't let them do that stuff to Luka, because I know it's going to start happening if next year they don't have the year that he wants to have. He's been the media darling for so long, and they're going to just try and tear him to pieces if he doesn't get a ring here soon, pretty much.
Yeah, and which is not fair because like you already mentioned,
he's 25.
It's just he's 25. He also had a lot of time, and like we said, like this is his first real deep run. I know he had that the when he beat the Suns, and then who did he lose to?
They lost to the Warriors. That was the year that the Celtics played the Warriors. Actually,
yeah. Oh yeah, because Wiggins, that was a really good Wiggins year. Which anyway, so yeah, I mean. They probably may just need, it still has some young, like for them next year. I think the real key is can some of the role players elevate?
Right.
Like apparently I already showed you that one Reddit thread where there's some Mavs fans that believe that he's going to be as good as Anthony Davis, which I highly doubt. But if he somehow starts, having a 3-ball or something, adding more to the repertoire, him or can be any other role players, they'll definitely make help elevate the Mavs and maybe be just that little bit or that extra skill or reliable skill set,
right,
maybe enough to get them right back in this conversation then next year. And who knows, maybe they like I said, I don't know their cap situations. And once again, I hate how the NBA cap is so
Mavericks cap
flexible.
Is tough. They do not have.
I'm about to say, so I feel like they aren't going to be able to like be in the whole arms race that free agency / the trade market's going to be. So
yeah, just looking at this, they've got Luka obviously locked up till 2027.
And they just signed Kyrie.
Kyrie's got a couple more years. They still have Tim Hardaway next year for $16 million. They still have PJ Washington for the next 2 years at $15 million apiece. They still have Daniel Gafford for the next 2 years at $14 million apiece. Maxi Kleber at $11 million apiece. Josh Green's contract extension kicks in next year, where he's getting about $13 million a year. They don't have a lot of flexibility here. I mean, the benefit here is you got a guy like Derek Lively, it was his rookie year, so he's on a very cheap contract. But, I mean, even apart from that, Dwight Powell was still on the books. Dante Exum's still on the books. Olivier Maxence Prosper was a rookie for them. He's still on the books. A.J. Lawson's still on the books. Jaden Hardy's still on the books. Like, basically the whole roster is coming back except for Derrick Jones Jr. His contract's up. But, yeah, he wasn't really making anything in the first place. So they do not have a lot of cap space.
And so it's going to have to be internal growth, which includes obviously that current roster that John has mentioned, and I think they have the first round pick this year.
Yeah.
So I'll double check, but even if they don't, it's probably thought to be internal because they're picking, I forget, probably in the 20s. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, and just be interesting to see what happens in the NBA offseason. I mean, because we may have to come back in like 2 weeks if if things really hit the fan, but. Because apparently, Jimmy Butler and the Heat are on out, not friendly. And like I said, who knows what the Heat are going to do? They feel like a big wild card. We already mentioned the Bulls feel like, will they get rid of Levine? Who knows?
Paul George, he could be, maybe leaving.
Yeah, he's apparently being talked about. Apparently, he might do sign and trade because apparently he might opt into his
player option.
Yeah, so. And then, apparently it'll just be interesting to see, too, also money-wise, because sometimes we've seen some years where teams go crazy and then the free agent pool isn't great. Not saying this year's isn't great, but, we all remember that Luol Deng, Mozgov, Evan Turner year where I think they posted that on Instagram. I saw, like, Alan Crabb, remember? Yep. All those people got not huge, but we're a bit overpaid for all of our opinions, and, I don't think it worked out well for anyone, so... but that's free agency. Anyway, so we'll be interesting to see remember that in the narrative that John mentioned. Don't be too hard on these young Mavs next season, especially Luka, especially if the media turns on them. But like I said, it feels like they'll probably end up talking about the LA and New York teams At least the mainstream anyway will be so. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for us. Like I said, we're not doing draft stuff just because especially it's just hard, too much to follow, and for both of us, and we got to get ready for NFL season about 2 months away, and we'll be back probably. That's when we probably will be back, is late July, early August. Start doing our NFL off-season overviews and such, and as well as our positional rankings. We'll be doing that again, obviously, but so we'll probably have a bit of a hiatus until then. And even if some crazy NBA stuff happens, we'll probably still be on hiatus. But anyway, any last comments you want to throw out there before we wrap it up?
That's going to be it from me.
All right, well, that'll be it from John, and that'll be all for myself. As always, thank you for your support and such. Feel free to, wherever you're listening, like, subscribe, etc. And yeah, like I said, we'll be back doing NFL for sure in about a month. Until then, everyone, enjoy your summer. Stay safe, especially if you're getting hit by heat, especially the heat that we're going to be dealing with here in the South. Good luck with that. But yeah, we'll be back in about a month to talk ball and such. Until then, everybody, adios.